Hi, today we're going to look at energy choices and security. And I know you could read through this on your own, so I'm just going to run through what I think is the most important. So, first, we need to understand the idea of energy security. So, that means a country's ability to provide its people with reliable and affordable energy. So, it's not going to get cut off, it's not going to be interrupted due to a political disagreement with another country. It is reliable. There is on here energy poverty. So energy poverty is referring to people who do not have regular access to modern electricity and other services. There are regions of the world that still today people live without electricity, or might have, electricity that is not dependable on a regular basis. Jumping down, the idea of non-renewable and renewable energy sources is something you just have to know. So non-renewable means that it would take hundreds of thousands or even millions of years to replace that energy source. We often think of fossil fuels as being non-renewable because it takes a super long time to replace them. So this here says they're finite. If we're looking at, the human scale and the scale of a human lifetime, then yes, within that scale, these fossil fuels are finite resources. We only have a limited amount of them to utilize, and then it'll take hundreds of thousands or millions of years to replace them. Renewable energy sources, on the other hand, are readily available anytime that we need them and are always replaceable. And then energy mix just refers to a country's combination of energy sources that they might depend on. So this is a graph of energy resources, and we're looking at a time span from 1990 to 2015, and we have these different consumptions of energy based on the fuel type. So if we look, we notice a few interesting patterns. So this is just good practice reading graphs. So fossil fuels dominate this graph, being the largest area to meet energy demands on the side. So it's just showing energy demands. And then we notice that some of them haven't really grown that much in the past 25 years, so since 1990. So if we look at the orange and the blue, and orange and blue refers to nuclear energy and then hydroelectricity. So those haven't changed much in the past 25 years, which seems a little surprising. So just something to look at the graph. We look at fossil fuels. Well, fossil fuels have really diverse or varied impacts. They, at their best, it's combustion and they just release some greenhouse gases. At worst, many other things can happen. So we have coal, which is extremely, extremely dirty. Um, a coal mining job would also be extremely dirty, and coal mining really is, I would think, an absolutely terrible job. It's dangerous, it's dirty, it exposes people to stuff that they should not be exposed to on a regular basis. Oil spills, so oil spills have occurred in many of the world's oceans and large open water zones, and they're really, really, really challenging to sequester, so to kind of close off and then to clean up. And then natural gas they've been pushing recently because it's supposed to be one of the cleanest, it's supposed to be the cleanest fossil fuel source. And they've started extracting natural gas in different forms, and I think we'll have an opportunity to talk about that in just a minute. So energy resources, so it says consumption of energy varies greatly by the region. So here we're breaking down energy consumption by type based on the region of the world, and we can see a lot of diversity. So some areas depend a lot more heavily on one resource than other areas. So if we look at the Middle East is really heavily dependent on oil and natural gas. The Middle East also exports a lot of oil products to other regions of the world, and it's a top trade item, and one of the things actually that makes quite a few of the Middle Eastern countries quite wealthy. So looking at other areas, we see the Asia Pacific area actually depends really heavily still on coal. We see North America is fairly diverse, Europe and Eurasia is fairly diverse too in the types of energy it depends on. So if we look, this is most MEDC, so that's more economically developed countries, or the developed countries, as we sometimes refer them to, or refer to them as. Okay, so these developed countries tend to use a greater mix of energy resources, which we see if we just glance at our graph. So if we look at this, Europe and Eurasia and North America seem to have more of a balance, so a greater mix of energy types that they depend on. If we also look, it says that renewable energy tends to be a rich nation option. So to establish those new infrastructures and to build factories, okay, that might create these large windmills or create solar panels, that requires quite a lot of economic investment that really only can be done in these more developed countries. Okay, moving on. Renewable energy, so we're just going to go through by type. You can read all the facts. So hydroelectric, so this is typically what we think of as we build a dam. Right? So you build a dam on a river and you're holding back a huge portion of the water and you create this reservoir. So a reservoir looks like a lake. If you've seen one, it looks like a lake, but it's man-made. So it's a reservoir. It's been put there by people, generally speaking, by creating a wall and just keeping the water in one location. And then we can open up these valves and we can open it up to allow a certain amount of energy through the bottom of the dam. The bottom of the dam, then when it's open, okay, we can control the amount of water moving through, and the water will spin these turbines that it goes up to a generator. The generator uses the movement to capture charged particles and then makes electricity. So this is extremely common. They're really, really common in certain areas of the US. And if you look at the side, it says they're very, very common in China, Brazil, Canada, and the US as well. Then renewable energy in the form of wind. So we have a solar farm, as I often call them. So this would be a solar farm. Solar farms are easily visible in certain areas of the world. So in the US, so I'm from the US, I'm from Colorado. If you drive through areas of Colorado, particularly the eastern side of the state of Colorado, you can see vast areas of land that are these, solar farms. So they have these giant turbines, and they look small, but please do not be deceived. This one part of the windmill itself would be, as long as an 18-wheel semi truck. So they're really big. So it's deceiving, but they are they're very, very large. So if we look, the leaders for this are China, the USA, Germany, and Spain. So you see China actually on multiple lists. So that's interesting because it's a nation that's very, very quickly developing. So one of the complaints about the windmills, as an ecologist here, I want to talk about the windmills and their risks. One of the big complaints about windmills is that they actually kill a lot of birds. So it seems like they're spinning very slowly from afar, but that if we think about it, the outside of the outside of the spokes, okay, is moving quite quickly. And if a bird were to fly through there, it could actually just hit them. And because they're moving so fast, they would die. And they say that this is quite a problem. Like if you walk through, you could find quite a few birds that had died this way, especially if a whole flock of birds was flying through this area because it was in their path. So that's one of the concerns with the windmills. They have biofuel, so biofuel can be created from crops. So if we have excess crops and we're not able to sell them, sometimes they can utilize them, or they could grow them specifically just for the biofuel purpose. One of the things that you see commonly in the United States, and I don't have a car here, so I haven't looked, but is ethanol. So ethanol can be produced from corn, and they often add it to petrol or gasoline. So they add, I think, about 10%. Um, so it's 10% ethanol, and the rest of it is gasoline or petrol. And it's just an additive, so it's a combustible additive that can be used as fuel. Then we have solar power, and solar power has been developing some pretty cool new technology in recent years. So if we look, we can see solar panels all over the houses in this region. And solar panels can be a little bit challenging to both create and to install, so it requires a little bit of infrastructure. So you need this solar panel, then you need this photovoltaic system. Um, you need to be able to not just capture it, but to store it, and then to make sure it's converted into energy that could be used directly in your home. So the system installation for a household can be a little bit expensive, but they're very common in some areas of the world, as you can see here. The other interesting thing about solar panels is that if you're plugged into the grid, so let's say your home is plugged into this grid, okay, for your energy supplier, whoever your energy supplier is, then if you produce an excess of energy, so you produce more energy than is used in your home, then it can go into the system. And in fact, if you produce an excess of energy, in some areas, the energy company will essentially send you a refund because you produced more energy than you consumed, which is an interesting idea. But I might actually go to the internet thing I opened. So I opened a page and I just wanted to show you that Tesla actually has developed a solar roof. And it looks quite normal. It looks like a regular roof on a home. I think it's very expensive, so you would need to look into that. But they created these different roofing systems that all capture solar energy. And if you go through, it's just interesting to glance at how they're marketing them. So they market them as being beautiful. They also market them as being extremely durable, and it shows some of that here. They also talk about they also talk about being off the grid reliability. So this is kind of an energy security or personal energy security idea that you own your own energy. So no matter what happens around your home, there's a power outage or I don't know, somehow your electricity got cut off for some other reason, that you would actually be able to create your own energy. So it's extremely reliable and secure for those reasons. So it's just an interesting way to market it. And you can continue looking at this. I think it would be interesting to request a quote or see how expensive it really is because it's a really, really, really cool idea. And so having that built-in photovoltaic cells just within your home and the roofing system, that sounds amazing. Then we're looking at renewable energy as geothermal energy. So this is common in areas that have some, thinking about like volcanic activity. So that would mean that it would be possible in Italy, and Iceland would be, I would think, the ideal location for this because of all the volcanic activity there. So geothermal. This is just heat from the ground. So if we're looking at magma that is fairly close to the surface of the earth, it could heat up water, and then they can use that heated water or steam to generate electricity. So it's a really, really cool idea. And this says that the USA is the world leader, but in reality, they're not making that much of their energy this way. So it says 0.4%. I mean, that's not that much. It's quite insignificant, really. And there's tidal power, so this is a cool idea as well. As we go through these, I mean, you're going to notice a couple things. All of these renewable energy um, sources are really things that move on a regular basis, as long as you can find a system or build a system to create energy from that movement. So to find a way to capture that movement, to run a generator from it, and to turn it into electrical energy, well, then you're golden, okay? Because it's possible to create renewable energy sources from any steady movement. So here they're using this back and forth movement of the tides in order to capture electricity. So pretty amazing if you live in a coastal area. Wave energy, again, using that regular movement in order to generate electricity. So you can read through some of this on your own. So then we go to the oil and non-renewable. So oil and non-renewable, I think we discussed this a little bit the other day, is excellent because everything's already made to fit with these non-renewable energy sources. So car engines are made that way. We already manufacture things that way. We have huge electrical generating